Hello to our first attendees. We've got Emma, David and Annie. Very welcome. Oh, I hate this when Teams does a transcript of what you're saying. No, thank you. Going to get rid of that. And
does that look all right, or do I need to? Are you seeing my presenter view?
That's perfect. No, I can see it as if you were presenting it. It looks perfect.
Okay.
Can you like see the chat from there, Gwyneth?
I can't. No.
That's what happens to me as well. So don't worry. I will.
Will you keep an eye on the chat for me?
Yeah. Don't worry.
Great. Okay. But you can see the slides, Sarah, and you just jump in.
Great. Thank you very much.
All right, brilliant. Welcome, Annie, David, Emma, Oscar, Zidane. Very nice to have you with us. We will get started in just a couple of minutes. I'd like to welcome you all, and I'm going to introduce you properly to our speakers in just a second. So maybe this is an opportunity to go and get a nice cup of tea or whatever, or a snack ready for the session. We have got an hour booked in for this. We may finish a little early. It depends on how many questions we have from the audience as well. But yeah, sit tight. You should be able to unmute yourselves. You shouldn't be able to turn your cameras on if the settings are right. So yeah, just give it a couple more minutes. Okay, I'm just waiting one more minute before we start. All right, everybody, I am going to get going in the interest of time. Welcome, Year 11. It's very nice to have you all with us, and I hope you've had a lovely weekend celebrating the end of your exams. You're going to have the best summer holiday, and you very well and truly deserve it as well. You've worked so hard this year. So for those of you who could join us on Friday, we had a really interesting session. We spoke to a former student of ours, Rosa Baxter, who attended Somerville College, Oxford, and read English. She's now a software developer at the Financial Times, and she was talking a little bit about her experience and how she made the decision that she was going to apply to the University of Oxford. And that was a really great session, and we are delighted to be able to welcome you back today to talk to our partner colleges at Oxford and Cambridge. So each of the universities have kind of geographical areas where certain colleges work. And so our partner colleges are Gonville and Keynes College, Cambridge, and Mansfield College, Oxford. And so I'm very, very delighted to welcome Gwyneth and Sarah, who are going to be presenting to us today about the universities of Oxford and Cambridge. And this is going to be such an important session because you're not hearing anything from me, you're hearing it directly from the horse's mouth. And the reason why we're offering you this session now, as opposed to next year or in a few months' time, is because it's a really good starting point to think about conversations at home about whether you want to make an application or not. And the summer of Year 11 is also a really, really good opportunity to start some of this supercurricular work that we're going to talk about in this presentation, making sure you're really getting to grips with your subject and exploring your own interests and developing your own curiosity as well. So without further ado, Gwyneth and Sarah, I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ellie. Thank you. Hello, everybody. My name's Gwyneth Hammond, and I am the London Outreach Officer for Gonville and Keynes, and I work with schools across South East London, so Greenwich, Bromley, Lewisham, and Bexley, but also some in the north, Newham, Barnet, and Waltham Forest. Sarah, would you like to?
Yes. Hello everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. I feel like this is a big achievement considering you've just finished your exams. So we really appreciate you kind of taking the time to come and listen to us speak. As I said, my name's Sarah. I work at Mansfield, which is one of the colleges in Oxford. And before that, I was a student there. I studied history, and I went to quite like a big inner city London comprehensive. So kind of Gwyneth and I wanted to give you a bit of an overview of what applying to somewhere like Oxford and Cambridge might look like for you, and also kind of more broadly, this advice will apply to competitive universities generally. So do kind of take that on board, even if you're thinking, I don't know if I'm interested in Oxford or Cambridge specifically. First of all, we hope we'll change your mind, but second of all, even if we don't, hopefully there'll be lots of useful advice in this presentation. Gwyneth, do you want to get us started?
Sure, absolutely. So, I mean, the first thing to say is that UK higher education has got an awful lot to offer, over 50,000 courses. You know, there are plenty of people who go and do degrees at Oxford and Cambridge, but also elsewhere, and then go on and do interesting work that really wasn't anything to do with their degree, but they've just gained a useful set of skills in their degree, and they're going into kind of graduate opportunities. So the truth is, you can go to university and study the subject that you like and then go on to work in a completely different field. There are lots of jobs where you don't necessarily need a specific degree for them. Now, obviously, there are lots of jobs that do, like medicine and engineering and nursing. But there are lots of interesting courses out there, and here are a few of my favourite. Okay, one from Cambridge that I really think looks very exciting and interesting is Anglo-Saxon, Norse, and Celtic, and this is a study of the ancient peoples of Great Britain, and you study their language, their history, and culture. And it's really quite niche, and it's early kind of very early history, but you also study the languages, so it's really quite an interesting and specialized course. But of course, other places have got some great courses on offer. School of Oriental and African Studies, you can study law with Chinese law. If you really are interested in the fashion business, fashion merchandise management at the University of Westminster, they've got great industrial links, and you learn a lot about the business side of fashion industry, and go out on work placements. People come out of that and go straight into really quite interesting jobs in the fashion industry. Is there anything, any particular course that is your favourite at Oxford? Sarah?
That's a good question. Well, I mean, apart from history, which obviously is the best subject, I think I just want to add that at this point in your kind of academic career, this is the first time where you get a real kind of choice in what you're studying, and gives you a real opportunity to have a moment of self-reflection and think, okay, what am I good at? What do I enjoy? You know, what would I like to do going forward? And choosing the degree that you want to study at university is the most important decision that you'll make about going to university. I think some people can get quite bogged down in, you know, where do I want to live, or what do I want to do after I go? But actually, the main question that you want to ask yourself is like, what do I want to study? And you know, we wouldn't expect you to know at this point what it is that you're interested in or anything like that, but take the time that you have now to really try and learn more about what university has to offer. So as Gwyneth said, there'll be loads of courses that you'll have heard of, so English, history, medicine, physics, chemistry, and then there's some other courses that might be more unusual, so material sciences or human sciences, which allow you to kind of keep your options fairly broad and do a bit of everything. So when you go to university, you don't necessarily have to do just one or even two subjects that you really like. There'll be one subject that could encompass multiple different disciplines. So don't feel like you have to restrict yourself too much when you think about the choice of course.
Absolutely. And that's that's a really interesting point, which I'm going to pick up on when we talk about the courses that are on offer at Oxford and Cambridge, because Cambridge in particular does offer quite a range of courses that are, as Sarah says, they combine lots of different elements and different subjects. But of course, so that's one main difference, obviously, that about going to university, but also studying at university can look quite different. There are elements of it that look similar. Seminars, and that bottom left-hand corner, they're kind of group, they're class size, and they tend to be a bit more interactive. But in the top left-hand corner is a lecture. There might be 200-300 people in a lecture theatre and somebody talking through their material, and you learn that way. If you're applying for a science course, you'll spend an afternoon or two in the labs every week. And if you are, I always say, if you're doing an ology, they tend to be things like courses like archaeology, geography, biology. A lot of those courses have learning where you go out and learn in the field. So I've got another colleague who works at another Oxford college, and she studied geography, and she spent 6 weeks in Tenerife as part of her geography course. Must be tough. Okay, so there are lots of different ways to learn, and at Oxford and Cambridge we have the small group work. And Sarah, I think you're the best person to talk about this, because you're the person who's done one of these most recently. In fact, I've never done them at all. So over to you. We call them supervisions at Cambridge, but at Oxford they call them tutorials, and they're basically the same thing. So
they are the same thing. One thing you'll probably realise is Oxford and Cambridge like to, be different, both from other universities and from each other. So often they just create like needlessly random words. But a tutorial is small group teaching, and this is unique to Oxford and Cambridge. And the way that we tend to teach is 1 tutor, 2 students, maybe 3 students. Sometimes you could be on your own in a tutorial, and kind of a tutorial learning is very self-guided, because you'll get given a piece of work at the beginning of the week. It might be a problem sheet or an essay, and you'll kind of go away and work on it, do a bit of teaching yourself, and then you come to the tutorial and spend an hour or 2 discussing that subject with somebody who's like an expert in that field. So it does rely on you being very self-motivated, and it does mean that they do work you pretty hard. And unlike school, where you get taught a topic and then you write an essay on it, or you get taught a topic and you get given homework to work through the problem sheet on it, at Oxford and Cambridge it's almost like the other way round. You do your learning and then you meet with the tutor, and they can kind of, having marked your work, either work through the problems with you or suggest other things that you want to read, or say, sometimes they will just say, you've got this completely wrong. You completely misunderstood.
Like, that ever happened to you?
Yeah, many times. Where they just, it's like you kind of rest your argument on one book, and they say that's not even what they were trying to say. You've got and I think actually one of the nice thing about tutorials is the work that you do for that, or like week to week, doesn't go towards your final grade. So it does allow you to be a bit more like experimental in your work. So if you want to try a new structure, or a bit of a rogue argument, or a new way of doing a maths problem that you've been doing for ages, you have the flexibility to do that without it counting towards your final grade. So I feel like that really encourages you to kind of learn in a different way. But also, kind of, this is probably not official but advice, but it also means that actually you don't, if 1 week you've got loads of social activities on, it's somebody's birthday, or you've got people visiting you and you don't have a lot of time to do your work, that's not going to be like detrimental to your final grade. Because if you hand in a bit of a rubbish essay, it happens to all of us, you just kind of do the tutorial and move on, and then you can come back to it at a later time to catch up. So I think the kind of having that relaxed, non-assessed way of teaching can be really helpful, because it allows you to kind of explore, and also allows you to get things wrong without it like counting towards something at the end. So do sort of bear that in mind. So yeah, I think the tutorial system is probably the biggest selling point of going to Oxford and Cambridge. And you want to think about like, how do you as an individual learn, and then apply that to the sort of course you might be studying. So if you're somebody who thinks, oh yeah, actually the idea of like sitting with a tutor and talking about a book I read is really interesting to me, then probably the tutorial system would suit you. Whereas if you're somebody who thinks I'm much, I learn in bigger groups, or I'm somebody who likes to kind of listen to something, take notes, go away and work on it on my own, then actually another university's teaching style will be much better suited to you. And again, Gwyneth and I would never say that Oxford and Cambridge is for everyone, and it's not suitable to everybody. And, if you choose not to apply based on the course, or because you don't think you'd enjoy the teaching style, that is the best reason to apply. We just don't want people to not apply because they think everyone's really posh, or they think that they won't like fit in or have a good time, because those things are just not true. But if you're thinking, actually this kind of teaching or exam, the way they're assessed is not for me, that's completely fine.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. There's just one thing that I wanted to add to this, which I hadn't realised, Sarah, which is that sometimes in a subject you might all be in a tutorial group. You might all be set slightly different essays around the same topic. So when people come to the tutorial group, they've written on the same topic or the same book or the same era of history, but from a different perspective. So you really get to learn from your peers as well.
Yeah, I think I would just add as well, the nice thing about that is you often can have quite a lot of control over what you're doing, even if you have to study like a certain period. If you're somebody who's really interested in gender history or politics, you can, in every topic, you can just make it an essay about like politics or about gender history, like, and that would never be an issue, because you can be as specialized or as general as you want in most subjects, which I think is quite nice.
Great, thank you. So once you've chosen your course, the other thing to think about is the kind of university that you might like to go to. And there is plenty, as I said, there is plenty to choose from. So there are city campuses. In the top left-hand corner, that's Queen Mary University, London. And these are campuses where the university buildings are intermingled with the city. So you might come out of a lecture theatre and walk past Tesco's, so that, and you can see that actually. University of London is a bit like that. You wander around Bloomsbury, the university buildings all over Bloomsbury. But there are also campus universities, that very kind of space-aged, top right hand corner, that is University of East Anglia, and bottom right hand, that is Warwick University. That's a really popular university for young people in London. And campus universities are, the whole university is all in one place, and there are halls of residence, student union, lecture theatres, swimming pools, sports facilities, seminar rooms, supermarkets, all in one kind of student city. And of course there are collegiate universities, which is what Oxford and Cambridge are, and collegiate universities have departments in the same way as all universities do, and then they have colleges which are like mini campuses. They become your home. And so I think Sarah went to Mansfield College. That's right, didn't you? Yeah. At Oxford. So when you apply to Oxford or Cambridge, you apply for a course, but you also apply for a college. So there are some pictures here of colleges. There's Gonville and Caius College, Cambridge, on the middle top row, and I'm afraid I haven't got one of Mansfield, but I do have one. I think that's Catherine's, isn't it? Row, left-hand side, with that kind of rather modern-looking sculpture. That is Catherine. So there's also thinking about the kind of university that you might want to go to, and whether you want to be in a rural setting or a seaside setting or an urban setting. You're going to spend 3, maybe more years there, and so it's worth having a think about that as well.
Can I just add that?
Please do. Yes.
As Londoners, you know, we love London and we don't want to leave. And people can feel like, why would I leave when I have everything here and there's so many universities I can go to? Just leave. Just go. You can go for 3 or 4 years, experience something new, meet like loads of new people, really push yourself out of your comfort zone. You'll grow so much as an adult, like as a person, and then you can always come back once you're done. You might, like me, end up thinking, actually, maybe the London life is not for me, and never go back. But if you're somebody who's really worried about kind of moving away from home, I think it's something that it's natural to feel like nervous about it. But I'd really encourage you to think about kind of your options and not confine yourself to London, because although there are lots of brilliant universities, outside of London also has so much to offer. So please do kind of think about that.
That is true. That is true. And actually, living in a smaller city or town, living in smaller cities like Oxford and Cambridge, where you can get to everything in about 20 minutes, half an hour on a bike, is fantastic, actually. But of course, Oxford and Cambridge are not the only universities. And in fact, I hope I'm not going to be shot down in flames by your teacher, but the Russell Group are also not the only universities worth considering. So the Russell Group are the kind of research intensive universities. Oxford and Cambridge are part of that group. So is Queen Mary University, London School of Economics. But there are also some great other universities that are highly competitive. University of Bath, not in the Russell Group. London College of London College of Fashion is part of the University of the Arts London, and which is highly competitive, and people come from all over the world to study there. So just to reiterate, you're right at the beginning of your kind of sixth form career, so you've got plenty of time to think, but I'm going to encourage you, I think, to go away and have a look at some courses over the summer and see what you like, and have a look at some of the universities on their websites and see what you like, because there will be plenty to choose from, and you are allowed to change your mind. But the most important thing is that you choose a course that matches your interests. We're going to talk a little bit now about specifically Oxford and Cambridge. It's true, Oxford and Cambridge are two separate places, but that word is kind of, Oxford and Cambridge are both kind of very established and well recognised universities and have been around for a long time, and are both collegiate universities. And so they've smushed those two places together to make a word called Oxbridge. And also, when you're applying to Oxford or Cambridge, because you can't apply to both, interestingly, you will have to apply slightly earlier than everybody else. But let's have a quick think about Oxford and Cambridge. Oxford and Cambridge are both collegiate universities. At Cambridge, we have 29 undergraduate colleges. That means colleges that you would do your first degree at, your undergraduate degree. So if you don't have a degree, you could go to one of these colleges and study. But they're not colleges like sixth form colleges. They're colleges that will organise your living. It's where you will eat. It's where you'll sleep. It's where you'll make a lot of your friends. And certainly at Cambridge, it's where we organise your supervisions. And I suspect that that's also true at Oxford.
I just wanted to add on the colleges. In a way, we've spoken about like city universities and campus universities, where one is all the buildings are spread out all over the city, and then campus university is where everything is in the same place. And Oxford and Cambridge do a bit of both. So like the colleges, the departments, the libraries, the facilities will be all over the city, but the college will be like a little campus that's within the wider university. So it'll have accommodation, food, like entertainment, things to do for fun you know, if it helps you visualize what it's like, I once spent like 2 weeks not actually ever leaving college because I had all my tutorials in the same place, and I could go to the dining hall and eat my food, go to the JCR to hang out with my friends, and it all felt very self-sufficient. So it kind of does a bit of both. And I think that's quite a good way of thinking about it, as like meeting in the middle between the university and between a city and a campus university. Oh, you're muted, Gwyneth, sorry.
Thank you. Just one thing to add to that, which is that, of course, if you apply to Mansfield College, Oxford, or you apply to another college, the degree that you come out with will be exactly the same, and that is true for Cambridge. So when you come out, you will come out with a degree. When you graduate, you will come out with a degree from Oxford or Cambridge, and it doesn't matter which college you went to. And when you apply to the university, you become a member of the university, obviously, the college, but also your department. Okay, so when you go into your lectures, you will meet other people from other colleges. Did you make any friends from other colleges, Sarah?
I did. I have to say, I think I approached it. I'm quite an insular person, as I've come to realise. Because I did a lot of like college level sports and things, so all of my friends were from college. And it was only towards like my final year when I started having lots of my classes outside of college that I met and made friends. But if you're somebody who is a real social butterfly, then you can make friends across the university very easily. But it wasn't really something that I was putting in that much effort into, sadly.
No, fair enough. And of course, there's room for everybody to approach their student life in whatever way they feel fit, actually. So there are lots of people there who will be party mad, but I'm sure there are plenty of people who are fairly introverted and just get on and do what they need to do. And here are some pictures of various colleges at Oxford and Cambridge. Above the wavy line are some Oxford colleges. Sarah, would you like to point some out for us?
Oh, this is a challenge.
It is a bit, isn't it? Sorry, I've really put you on the spot. I think the top left-hand corner is Queen's, is it? No, Catherine's. Oh, it's Queen's. Oh, there we go. I got that right, yeah.
And then underneath that, we have Keble.
Oh, okay.
And then I think on the other side, you have at the bottom LMH, that little red one, and then St. Cat's is next to it. On top, we have Christchurch is the one with the like 4 little grass bits. And I think one of them is Jesus College, but honestly, I'm struggling now.
You're doing really well. No, you're doing really well. Because I can identify 4 Cambridge colleges. So below the wavy line on the left-hand side, that's a modern college, which is Churchill College. Next to that, just to the right of it, is Gonville and Caius, the college that employ me and that I work for. And then below that very grand looking one is King's College. And the one on the bit further along that looks a bit like a large multi-storey car park is Robinson's College. So you can see that whilst most of them are old, there are some modern colleges there. Obviously, the older colleges tend to be more central, and the new colleges tend to be more on the outskirts. But just for those London-centric people, to remind you that actually, when you go to Oxford and Cambridge, these are great cities in their own rights, with sports facilities, parks, shops, places of worship, nightclubs, markets, everything that you would want from a city.
And Oxford is actually one of the youngest cities in the UK, and it's much smaller than London, but there are just so many like cafes, bars, pubs, clubs, cinemas, like anything you can possibly imagine. So yeah, should I talk a bit about college life?
Oh, please do, yeah.
So I think the college system is really helpful for making friends. So the University of Oxford, for example, has 22,000 students. That's quite a lot of people. That could feel quite daunting. Whereas within a college, they vary slightly in size, but they're like much smaller communities. In Oxford, we have like Mansfield, for example, is probably one of the smaller colleges. You have about 70 to 80 undergraduates in a year group, and then the biggest colleges will have like 160, 170. So Cambridge do have slightly bigger colleges, but even then, it will be quite comparable to like a year group at school. And I think that makes it really easy to make friends, partly because all of you are living in the same place, you're all like using the same facilities. And the college kind of organises, as Gwyneth said, your teaching, your food, your accommodation, and also things like sports societies, entertainment. Often when you go to university, people talk about like Freshers Week, which is the first week that you arrive and there's loads going on, both kind of lots of parties and social events to go to. And I think lots of universities, pretty much every university does have that to some extent. But the nice thing about Oxford and Cambridge is they continue to organise events like throughout the whole year. So it doesn't feel like you've got to make all your friends in your first week, or otherwise you're not going to have an opportunity to meet people. So pretty much all colleges have something called a BOP, which is like a fancy dress party. You get given a theme. It's usually something quite silly, and you dress up and you go, and it's a bit like a school disco. Have things like pub quizzes in college, sports days, and the colleges also organise things like sports and societies. And probably my favourite thing about Oxford is that you can do sports and societies at 2 levels. So let's say you're really good, you've played like basketball for your whole life, and you can play it really competitively. You can play for the university team. Usually you'll get like paid to represent the university, could go abroad, play against other universities. But if you're somebody who just wants to play a sport casually, or like take up new sport to meet people, you can do it at your college level. And you can go like once a week, or you could go once a term. You're not going to get kicked off. There's not really like trying out in the same way. So that means that you can do lots of different things and not have to commit to one thing in particular. And you don't even need to be good at it. And that's very helpful for some of us. So I think that can be a really nice way of kind of making friends as well. And also your college provides things like academic and pastoral support. So I know that one thing I really worried about going to university was feeling like I was kind of on my own, or if I found the work really difficult, like would I just be stuck and have nothing, there's like nothing I could do about it. But actually at Oxford, because you're seeing your tutors so regularly, so as Gwyneth and I said, you have tutorials with them, they get to know you really, really well. You're not just like a nameless, faceless person in a group. And also they can actually tell really quickly if you're kind of not yourself, whether it's through your work or just like in conversation with you. And it's something that they're very easily able to pick up on and kind of intervene, which I think is really helpful. I mean, at the end of my second year, I was having quite a difficult time kind of generally. And my tutor was one of the first people to be like, oh, I feel like there's something going on, and just kind of like organised a meeting and thought about how I could rearrange my work to kind of fit around my like mental health and things. And I found that so helpful. And I feel like I was really worried that sort of thing would just be missed when you go to university. But yeah, it's a really not like fun place to be a student. In Oxford and Cambridge, there's always a million and one things going on. You can never do all of them, but I think one thing as well, I feel like you have a better life-work balance at university than you do at A-levels, which can sound kind of crazy because, see, the work gets harder. But I think the pressure of like A-levels can feel a lot more intense to you than it will when you're at university. And because you're living in the same place with your friends, it makes it much easier as well to have that, you're not just working all the time.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Sarah. There's one last thing that I was going to add to that, which is that, of course, when you go to your college organises your accommodation actually for all 3 years of your degree. And when you study at university, you'll become a member, you'll use your college library, but also the departmental library and the Central University Library. There will never be a reason to buy a book because somebody will have bought it for you. So the resources at Oxford and Cambridge are really great. And these are the courses that you can study. And I wonder if people have got any questions about this or any reflections, because one of the things that I thought when I looked at this was, goodness me, there aren't many science courses, are there? Yeah. And one of the things that is very particular about Cambridge is that many of our courses are very broad. A good example of that would be natural sciences, and that's, you would study that if you wanted to study chemistry, physics or biology, and you come to the university and study natural sciences, and you can, in the first year, you study 3 subjects plus maths. And so that could be 2 physicsy type subjects and a chemistry type subject, or 2 physicsy and a biology. And you keep your options quite broad, which is one of the reasons why we don't have many joint honours courses. Would you like to talk a little bit about some of the what are special about Oxford, Sarah?
Yeah, I think so at Oxford, I think that's actually one thing that does really differentiate Oxford and Cambridge is the courses. Even something like English or history can actually look quite different. So it's really worth doing the research into that. I would say for the big differences is that we do offer, for example, physics, chemistry and biology separately, so you don't have to do a really broad course. But I think one thing that is important to note is lots of the science courses are just fundamentally underpinned by maths. So a lot of people, when I talk to them about university, are sort of like, oh, I really want to do physics or chemistry or biology, but I'm not that keen on maths, or I want to do engineering. How important is maths? And it is probably the most important thing that you can do. And partly that's because our courses are very kind of like conceptual. So a big part of it is being able to like get the fundamentals right and then kind of working to make that harder and harder. So I would kind of stress that. And I think it's quite similar at Cambridge as well with regards to the maths for the science courses being kind of king.
Absolutely. So I would go as far as to say, if you are considering computer science, engineering, mathematics, chemical engineering, or natural physical sciences, to make sure that you've got maths and further maths in your arsenal as part of your A-level options, because those courses are very maths heavy. And further maths will be a massive bonus for you.
And kind of with the humanities courses, it's also, again, they're very like conceptual. So for example, something like history, at school you're very used to learning a topic, and then a question might be like, what were the main causes, or was this the main cause of the Second World War, for example? Whereas one of my first essays I did at university was, is it fair to say that the Holy Roman Empire was nor holy, nor Roman, nor an empire? And I remember just sat there thinking, what have I let myself in for? So it's much, with the humanities, they're not going to be there getting you to like learn things and then regurgitate them, or learning facts and figures. Even in English, you're not kind of memorizing quotes or anything. It's much more about how you approach the subject in a conceptual sense. And so the questions do get quite difficult. But I think that's what makes it really exciting, and it can be quite fun once you get past the kind of the dread of answering a question like that.
Thank you very much. I was just going to take interject very quickly there. That sounds so interesting, that essay, Sarah. Since we're about halfway through and we're looking at these courses at the moment, I just wondered if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask about courses in particular. I've been writing a couple of questions as we go through, but any questions about subjects that we're doing, or what any of these subjects really are, or what they mean as well? Anything at all? Feel free to
absolutely, please do if anyone's got any questions. One that I was just going to point out here, on the left hand side there's human, social and political sciences, and that's a combination of sociology, politics, anthropology And it's one of those very broad courses that you stay broad in the first year and then you can specialise. So are there any questions for us, Ellie?
Yeah, if you dislike your chosen course, can you change it whenever you want? I think that's a really good question. I think it's something people worry about a lot. But I think part of what Gwyneth and I do is about getting you to a point where you're actually quite sure about the subject that you're applying to. So it actually doesn't happen very often that people get to university, especially to Oxford and Cambridge, with kind of the process and then realise, oh, I've applied for physics, but oh God, I wish I'd done history or maths or even engineering. Like, it's actually quite uncommon that people get to that stage of thinking, I really don't like my course. So there is an opportunity to change, but it can actually be quite difficult because you might have to complete your first year and then like do an admissions test and get in as you would the typical way. But I think if you're kind of asking that question, you might want to think about the fact that up until the point you choose your subject, you're spending a lot of time like researching it and talking. You can come and visit us and talk to us about what would be involved in the actual course, that hopefully you're making a really informed decision. But obviously if you get there and you just think, oh God, this is a huge mistake, we're not going to force you to do that course or anything. I think you're muted again.
Sorry. Can you see the slides, Sarah? Cool. Okay. All right. Are there any other questions?
Shall we crack on and then see if we have time for questions?
Okay. So I'm just going to summarise. I don't think this is going to be surprising to any of you. What we're looking for is academic ability and aptitude for your chosen course. And what I'm going to talk to you about in a minute is how you might find out whether you've got that kind of academic ability and drive. And that academic ability and drive looks like this: that you're enthusiastic and motivated by the subject that you've chosen, that you have got self-discipline and self-motivation and commitment. Because as Sarah says, you know, you'll have quite a lot of things to do and the work can be quite challenging. So you'll need to be really motivated and you'll need to have a kind of sense of independence and ability to think for yourself. But we're also looking for people who can work with us in those supervision and tutorial sessions. And if you're thinking about applying for vet science or medicine or something like that, we're looking for people who want to pursue a career in that. But that's only for those vocational courses. Is there anything you want to add to that, Sarah?
Yeah, I think it's important to stress that we do really care about your academic ability, but we're equally, if not more, interested in your academic potential. So actually, when the tutors are assessing your application and interviewing you and reading all your forms and stuff, they're sort of thinking, would this person come here, work really hard for 3 or 4 years and then like, you know, finish with a first? Or it's not about how clever you are at that specific point. It's about how willing you are to like tackle difficult problems and how willing you are to learn. Because if you're somebody who is already really, really smart and, you know, could easily pick up all of the material that you're being taught, there'll be absolutely no point of like teaching you. So it is partly about how good you can be in 3 or 4 years once you've had that expert teaching. So don't feel like I've got to have like all this knowledge already before I arrive, because a lot of it will be totally unfamiliar to you. And you might be studying a subject which you have never studied before. So we wouldn't expect you to be really good at that subject. It's about showing that you do have that academic ability by having a really strong set of GCSEs, predicted A levels, but actually in the process we're assessing how far you'll go as well.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Yeah, okay. So what we're going to look at now is what you can be doing now to kind of explore your subject and start the process of making a successful application. And we're going to talk about supercurricular activities. And these are things that you can do in your spare time that are kind of relevant to the subject that you might want to study at university, and they'll help you extend and deepen your knowledge. Okay. And through doing it, you will develop skills and knowledge. You'll also start to develop your skills around managing your time and your independent study. And of course, it's fantastic evidence about for admissions tutors and people who are looking at your academic record when you're applying for universities. And I think the main thing here, and I'm going to ask Sarah to tell us her story in a minute, but if you're not quite sure about what you want to study, actually reading around your subject, listening to podcasts, listening to documentaries, talking to people about your subject is a great way to find out what really floats your boat, what you really enjoy. And I know Sarah's got quite an interesting story on this in terms of how she used her supercurricular activities to choose which direction she wanted to go in, because I don't think you were completely sure to start off with, were you, Sarah?
Yeah, I think for me, I didn't know what I wanted to study till probably the start of year 13, which felt like I was leaving it really late, because there's some people who are just like have known for a really long time. And for me, I knew that I was going to do like a humanities or a social science subject, because that's kind of what I found interesting, what I was really good at. But when I was thinking about applying, I was really torn between like history, English, law, maybe even PPE. And what I did was I like read around all of them. So I like went away and researched what it all involved, and also did the supercurricular of like listening to the podcast, reading the articles. And I actually just kept finding that everything I was interested in all of those subjects was like the history of it. So in something like English, which is a subject I really enjoyed at school, the thing that I found most interesting was like understanding the context behind the book rather than actually doing the analysing. And equally with law, it was about like how that came to be the law rather than this is the law and how you apply it. And so for me, that was a really good way of being able to like connect those dots and think, okay, what is it about all of these subjects that I like? And it might have been, you know, for you, it might be the case that there'll be a whole new subject that would encompass all of those interests better. But the thing with supercurricular is it should also be fun. Like if you're finding it a real slog, we would never say that this should consume, you know, like a 4th A level or anything. You should just be doing it kind of on the background, ticking along. But if you're finding that it's like a real chore to spend 20, 30 minutes a week thinking and learning about your subject, potentially it's not the right subject for you. And we're not saying you're going to enjoy every single part of a subject. As Gwyneth knows, I don't care about anything that happened before the 1900s. Controversial. And so if I was reading lots of medieval history, I know that I would be bored, and that's okay. You can have your niche and you can kind of follow that, but it's about having that interest and genuinely being motivated to study the subject as well. And in terms of what counts as supercurricular, we're really not snobby about the way in which you choose to engage with your subject. I find YouTube videos are actually a really good way of getting you started. Even for like the sciences, there's loads and loads of people online now like working through difficult problems, and that could be a really nice way of starting yourself in easy, because I think if you think I've got to go and read a big academic book, that'll be really daunting, especially because it's not something you will have done up until this point. So start yourself off easy by doing a podcast, or if you learn something at school and you think it's interesting, type it into Google, see if there's a BBC article about it or a lecture or something like that.
Agreed. Absolutely. I think, you know, probably set yourself a target of 10 minutes 2 or 3 times a week to start off with. It's really not very much at all. And there isn't any one thing, as Sarah says, that counts as supercurricular. It could be a whole range of things. So it can be, you know, the obvious one is reading. And you can use something like Google Scholar, which will bring up articles in a range of subject areas, and it's all free. But you know, you could go to your local library, you could use your school library. I'm sure many of them will have really interesting magazines such as New Scientist, Economist, Nature. But also, if you're thinking about studying a foreign language, you might want to look into reading a foreign language newspaper, or even just starting off with foreign language printed cartoons and watching children's cartoons on telly. All of that is fantastic. There are loads and loads of talks and lectures. You know, I hate to say it, there are some advantages to COVID, and one of them is that actually loads and loads of really good resources are now available online. These are some of my favourites, but you can, as Sarah says, you can Google it and find all sorts of different ones. So the Gresham lectures are fantastic. I dug those out for the year 11, for my Keys 11 and 12 programs, and students really liked those. The Royal Society Christmas lectures are great. There is sometimes students who are interested in mathematics and physics and science struggle a bit with lectures, but the Oxford do a series of public lectures on mathematics. Those are available. But I also think podcasts are great, and the world is your oyster here. There's so much out there. And the great thing about a podcast is that you can do it and listen to a podcast, you know, on the bus, on the way to school, or walking to school, or doing your chores at home, folding your laundry, a bit of multitasking. I'm a massive fan of being efficient with your time and not flogging yourself to death. So as Sarah says, start off with something that that is easily accessible, and you know, if you read a couple of articles, listen to 2 or 3 podcasts over the summer holidays, that would be a great way to start exploring your subject and finding out what floats your boat.
I just also wanted to add that you're in a very privileged position being in London, because all of the London universities offer plenty of master classes and lectures and summer schools and essay competitions, which you can take advantage of. So I would definitely try and take advantage of any of those. Just apply, go, even if it's a random day, master class on physics or chemistry. One of the best ways to find out if you like a subject is to go and see what it would be like to study it. So if you go on a day trip or a summer school where you're studying physics and you realize, oh, this is definitely not what I want to do, then that's a really good use of your time. Don't feel like you've wasted your time or anything. So definitely keep an eye on what the University of London is doing, because they do lots of really great work kind of in and around your area.
The other thing to think about, of course, is that London has got loads of free museums, and you guys have all got zip cards you can get on the bus for free. So visiting a museum is also a great way of exploring a subject. And I suggest that you keep a note of everything that you do. And actually, the most important thing that we want to know is, what did you think about it? And what does it make you want to do next? So that's a really, really important. These notes, they don't have to be much. They can just be, you can just keep a voice note on your phone, or you can type in the notes, or keep a notebook. But do keep a record of everything that you've done. You will be very, very glad for it when you are applying for university. And of course, there is a really strong link between the supercurricular work that you do and your university application. And I think there are 2 things that it really helps with. It will really help you make sure that you are choosing the right course. Because as Sarah says, if you go to a physics lecture and you are bored rigid, you know that maybe that bit of physics isn't for you, and maybe you should try something different. It doesn't mean that physics isn't for you, but it might mean that astrophysics isn't for you, and that you might prefer mechanics or something like that. Okay. So it helps you make a really, really good choice, but it also will enable you to really kind of explore your subject and demonstrate your passion in your application. Okay, so and through doing it, your thoughts may change. Like Sarah, you may not be sure And then through reading and listening to podcasts and talking to people, you will actually think, actually, this is what I'm interested in. This is what I'm going to do. So please do spend some time over the summer looking at some of those resources. Okay, so what can you do now? You've all just finished your GCSEs. Really, you want to have the best summer off, and I completely understand that. But as Sarah says, this should be fun. So start having a quick look at some university courses and see what the entry requirements are and what the courses are that you're interested in. Make sure that you're doing the right subject combinations for those courses. If you really want to do science, for example, at a place like Oxford and Cambridge, you definitely need to have 3 science A-levels, science or maths. And start doing some supercurricular work in your subject and find out a little bit more about what you are interested in. I would say slow and steady wins the race here. Aim to do 10 minutes once or twice a week. It's a bit less intimidating. Start off with a podcast or something like that, and you will start to form a habit, which will stand you in good stead once you're in year 12. And do talk to your friends and family about your subject interest. That's a really good way of finding out what excites you as well. So I think that's it from us. I wonder if anybody has got any questions.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you, Gwyneth. That was fantastic. I'm sure people do have questions while they gather theirs. Just to say, everybody, that Oscar, I know I've had an email from you already, but if you are interested in, if you don't know where to start, but you're looking for podcasts or recommendations for things that could start this process of reading, get in touch. We have lots and lots of recommendations and can help you with that at school. And also talk to your teachers if you're thinking about exploring this. Your teachers will know you really well. They'll know where your subject interests have been at GCSE. They might be able to push you in the right direction. I have one question, which is quite basic. I'm really sorry. I wanted to ask, because I think this might be on people's mind as they apply. Is it more expensive to go to Oxford or Cambridge than any other university? Because it looks expensive.
This is my favourite question. Do you mind if I start answering this, Sarah? So this is my favourite question because the answer is absolutely not. One of the things that people are surprised by is that Oxford and Cambridge both have quite short terms. They have 8-week terms, and your accommodation is organised for you by your college. So you come up to college and you are there for 10 weeks each term. So you pay for 10 weeks accommodation each term, and that's true throughout your degree. And most other universities, you will have to pay for 36 weeks, 42 weeks, 50 weeks. It depends. You can get different kinds of contracts, and in your second and third year at most other universities, you will have to go out and rent in the private landlord sector. So you'll have to take out a contract for a whole year. So whilst at Oxford and Cambridge you're paying for 30 weeks a year, at other universities you're paying for the whole year. So that's one of the ways in which Oxford and Cambridge are cheaper, but they are also wealthy institutions, and there are lots of resources and
bursaries,
scholar bursaries to apply for. So Oxford has an excellent bursary scheme, which is almost identical to Cambridge's very excellent bursary scheme, where students can apply for up to £3,500 a year to support their studies. And then there are additional bursaries. If you come to Gonville and Caius, you get £150 a year. Every student gets it to buy their books, for example. And there's additional money for travel or to help you meet any costs of your course. We are very clear at Oxford and Cambridge that we do not want finance to be a barrier to whether students do well.
think we have some questions.
Yeah, there are.
If I think that I could handle the workload, would you recommend a 4th A level over an EPQ? So first of all, an EPQ is not something that we consider as part of your offer. So I think an EPQ can be a really great way of doing a supercurricular activity and also learning more about your subject, developing those university skills of reading and researching and answering questions in long forms. So it's definitely beneficial in that way. In terms of a 4th A level, unless it's an additional further maths, I genuinely do not think it makes that much of a difference. If all of the offers are for 3 subjects, so you're not necessarily going to be you're not going to be advantaged by doing 4 A levels unless that 4th A level allows you to do an extra subject that is needed for the course that you want to do. We don't actually recommend it because it is quite a lot of work, and I think that's why we only take the 3, give an offer for the 3. And then we have, does work experience count as supercurricular work? Yes, it does. And that could be a good way of getting started as well. I think for medicine, veterinary medicine, those are the only subjects that require you to do work experience. But if you wanted to be a lawyer or an engineer, it could be a good way of learning about what that career entails. And then as you go further into your research, let's say you go and work in a law firm and you learn a bit about how it works, and then you kind of want to take what you learn and research it further. So I think, yeah, definitely it does count as supercurricular work.
And on the subject of an EPQ, the reason why I think students who do an EPQ, it really develops confidence in your ability. I mean, watching students present their EPQ topics so passionately is one of the highlights of my year. But also another thing, when you study an EPQ, because it's an independent research project, you go through the process of recording your research, that process of, I read this is what I learned from it, I found it interesting because, therefore it made me then go and read this or look at that. And that's a very similar process to what Gwyneth and Sarah have been talking about here, that when you put your personal statement together and you're thinking about that application, what we're looking for is a process, a thought process. Where's your interest and where did it take you? What did you do with that? So an EPQ does, although it's not considered in the offer, just sit sometimes very snugly, very nicely alongside that kind of application.
Ellie, can I add something to that?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, go on.
So sorry, I was just going to say there's a young woman that I met last year at one of our schools. I think you know her actually, Sarah, and she did an EPQ on glaciers because she was really into glaciers, and she applied to Cambridge to study geography, and that was one of the key things that she talked about in her personal statement, and then again at the interview, because that was her passion. And I think it really supported her, whilst it obviously isn't part of the offer. I think it is a great way, as you say, of structuring your your supercurricular work. Sorry, Sarah.
So I just wanted to add as well, if you're thinking of studying a subject that you aren't able to do at A level, or it's not something that's directly related to what you've been studying at school, doing an EPQ is an excellent way of demonstrating your interest in it. Because, for example, you want to do
Anglo and Norse studies.
Yeah, or something like law, even, where work experience is not a requirement. And let's say you're not somebody who's able to get work experience at a law firm, doing a project where you research, think and write about it is a great way to say, this is how I'm demonstrating that I'm interested in it and I've taken the time to do something related to it. Because often it can be easier, I studied history A level, I want to do history at university, but most people don't have, if they're applying for a subject that's a bit more
a good example of that is
like an A-level subject, it can be a really good way of getting evidence to show that you want to study that subject as well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, a really good example of that I was going to say is classics, because often it's talked about as one of the most exclusive subjects, and I think at Oxford and Cambridge you can apply for classics if you don't do them at A level. You just need to go on a summer school beforehand, but an EPQ is a really, really good way of showing that as well. I was going to say that this year, we've had everything. We've had EPQs on racism in football, international responses to the Israel-Palestine conflict, robots, the use of robots in medicine, real opportunity to explore your passion there. So I'd really encourage an EPQ. Do we have any final questions? I'm very aware that we're very much eating into Sarah and Gwyneth's evening, and I want to let you go very soon, release you. But any further questions? While anyone's thinking of those questions, the only thing to flag is that this Wednesday at 1:30 I am leading a little session in school to follow up on these sessions, and if you'd like to come along to that, you'd be very, very welcome. I've sent everybody, I think, a link to a form where you sign up to confirm your attendance, but we would love to have you. I know it's a big ask to ask you to come all the way into school, but coming into Mansfield just for an hour of your afternoon on a Wednesday during the day, just to come and meet me and sort of do a follow-up, and we're going to be breaking down some of these courses and what they mean, so it'd be lovely to see you there. I don't think we have any other questions on that note.
I wanted to add that obviously you're so early on in this process, and both of us, Mansfield and Caius, will be there to provide more information, more guidance as you get further into the process. So don't worry if you're kind of thinking, oh, this all seems very overwhelming. This is not just going to be one talk and we kind of leave you to it. And I know your school is really kind of invested in making it a kind of a much more formal process of when you get the information and how that feeds into what you're doing at school. So don't worry too much about it at this stage. There's a lot more information to come as well.
Definitely. The main thing is just to enjoy learning and thinking about the subjects that excite you most. All right, everybody, have a lovely evening. I hope to see as many of you as possible on Wednesday. And if not, I will see you on Monday at our Taster Day on the 4th of July. So make sure, I think everybody here has signed up, but make sure you do. Sarah, Gwyneth, as always, thank you so much for your time. We'll be in touch.
Thanks for having us.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.